Welcome to Euronews. I'm Helena Humphrey, and this is special coverage of the news that Britain's Queen Elizabeth II has died and King Charles III is now monarch. Well, King Charles and Queen Consort Camilla have arrived at Buckingham Palace in central London from Balmoral in Scotland. King Charles greeted crowds of well-wishers and he took in the floral tributes left outside of the gates of what was the Queen's main residence. Meanwhile, guns around the country and some even further away have been sounded to mark the life of the Queen, and later in one of his first acts as monarch, King Charles will deliver a televised address to the nation. This evening, a memorial service will be held at St Paul's Cathedral as events begin, culminating in a state funeral expected in around 10 days' time. And tributes to Queen Elizabeth II have been flowing in from across the UK and the 54-country Commonwealth of Nations, looking back at the monarch's long life and legacy. Matthew and our team in the Cube have been taking a look at some of the reaction.
The rock on which modern Britain was built. The words of the new UK Prime Minister Liz Truss following the death of Queen Elizabeth II. It was only on Tuesday that Queen Elizabeth had broken with tradition by receiving Liz Truss at Balmoral Castle in Aberdeenshire, the 15th UK Prime Minister she received during her 70 years on the throne. And many other former British leaders have been paying tribute to Queen Elizabeth in statements and in posts on social media. The former Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron released a statement saying that no words can adequately describe the sense of loss that our nation will feel. Meanwhile, the Tony Blair Institute said that the UK had lost someone who, more than any other, had brought the country together. Tributes for Queen Elizabeth are, of course, most heartfelt in the UK, not just from political leaders, but also figures in the world of religion, culture, media and sport, as well as ordinary UK citizens. But Queen Elizabeth was also the head of state of 14 other independent sovereign states, as well as the leader of the 54-strong Commonwealth of Nations. And many other worldwide leaders from that Commonwealth have also been paying tribute. Speaking to reporters, the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, seemed on the verge of tears, saying that the Queen was someone who was one of his favourite people in the world, and I will miss her so, adding on social media that her service to Canadians will forever remain an important part of our country's history. The leaders of former British colonies have also been paying tribute, including the President of Ghana, who said that he had fond memories of the Queen's visit to his country. Her first trip to Ghana was, of course, controversial. Queen Elizabeth famously danced with Ghana's then-President Kwame Nkrumah, which many people believe was a symbolic moment in the history of the Commonwealth. And perhaps describing Queen Elizabeth's legacy, not just on the UK, but on the Commonwealth and the world as a whole, was the Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, who said that through the noise and the tumult of the years, Queen Elizabeth embodied and exhibited a timeless decency and an enduring calm.
Well, earlier we spoke to journalist and royal biographer Claudia Joseph, and she said that the Queen was a calming presence in periods of significant turmoil for the royal family.
She had terrible moments, and she had a very difficult time in the 90s with 3 of her children's marriages breaking up, and then that fire at Windsor Castle, which obviously was heartbreaking for her. But I think she always believed, as in generations before her, that you don't air your feelings in public, and that life must go on. And she's got a very strong, or she had a very strong religious faith, and I think that kept her going.
In some ways, the royal family, like any other family, had issues of its own. But nevertheless, what was pretty remarkable about the Queen is that her popularity rating around the world was always around 70%, which is high.
Well, I think she never put a foot wrong. I mean, she dedicated herself, her life to service. And I think that no matter where you were in the world, you have to respect that, because that is something that not many people can say, if anybody. We've seen, presidents changing, prime ministers changing, but the Queen has been the mainstay of the international stage.
Well, when Queen Elizabeth ascended to the throne at the age of 25, her face became the image on every unit of British currency, the pound sterling. Every postage stamp, too, bore her profile, and every minister had to swear allegiance to the crown above all else. Well, tomorrow, when King Charles is proclaimed monarch by the Accession Council at his residence, St James's Palace, the crown will pass from female to male ruler for the first time in 7 decades. And we asked royal historian and author Professor Susanna Lipscomb about how Queen Elizabeth II's reign could be compared to that of Elizabeth I.
Well, of course, there's a parallel, although Elizabeth I had executive power, and that's the key difference between the two Elizabeths, that one of them, our most recent beloved queen, has been a monarch who had to work out what it meant to be a constitutional monarch, who didn't have that executive power. And I think it was particularly interesting that she was doing that at a time of decolonisation, of Britain's declining power in geopolitical and economic terms, whereas previous monarchs had presided over an expansion of that power. You know, we could discuss the ethics of that, and there certainly are implications, but the truth of the matter is that she had to work out what her role was in that new dispensation. And it seems to me that she worked that out by creating a blueprint based on her character. In fact, actually, at her coronation, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Geoffrey Fisher at the time, said that her spiritual power would come from her personal character, conviction and example. And I think that what we've seen over the last 7 decades is that her character has shaped the nature of the role.
I think that's a very important point to make. Do you think that she ever wanted to make a point about being a woman? For example, there's that story of her driving the Saudi crown prince around her estate in Balmoral. Personally, when Saudi women were not allowed to drive, we know that she was a mechanic during the war.
I get the impression that she was just very pragmatic and no nonsense. And so I'm sure she was making something of a point. But in her subtle way. Of course, the thing about the Queen is that she was amazingly discreet. She said very little, gave her impressions on political matters almost never, and that reserve was legendary. So she didn't have the position to say things openly, but her actions, like that one, speaks volumes and shows a sort of, well, I'm just going to get on with it kind of approach that I think did characterise her very much, actually, in all sorts of ways.
You talk about that discretion, and of course, one thing we're never really meant to know about a monarch is their political leanings, but you could argue to what extent others would necessarily take that with the seriousness that she did. She really did seem to take these beliefs to the grave, didn't she?
We have some insight. She certainly believed very much in a united Britain, and she did occasionally let that slip in some of her addresses or in her Christmas broadcasts. But you're right that really we don't know, which way she would have voted had she done that. We don't know her perspective on all the prime ministers, the 15 of them that she met, or indeed on the presidents of the United States. She also met 15 of those, one of them not in office. We don't know her perspective on many things, and you're right, she certainly took that quality very seriously. And one of the questions over the new king is that he has often made his perspective known on matters in the past, and now that he is the monarch, he won't be able to do that anymore. So we won't hear his views on anything, whether it's architecture or agriculture, and that's going to be something he has to learn not to do, not to share those with us.
All right, let's go back out now to take a look at those live pictures at Buckingham Palace in London, which of course was the Queen's main residence in the capital, where the flag will remain at half-mast. Thousands of people continuing to gather to pay their respects, bringing flowers, photos and written messages as the nation enters a new era, the reign of King Charles III.